Hello everybody, so welcome to the lecture about pedagogy that links to pedagogy. Now, there are a couple of things to say around the work that's associated with this lecture. So this talk is probably going to last about 20 minutes, but the work that's around it is, first of all, there are two readings on Moodle for you to do. If you can read them both, please. One is this one here, which I happen to have here. So this is the early history of the scaffolding metaphor by Schwartz and Barker. And that explains the history and the different definitions of the metaphor that we use for much of what we do in teaching scaffolding. And in that, they reference an article, which is the second article you've got from 1976, Woods et al., which is seen as the seminal article where the word scaffolding came into the lexicon of teachers in this country and explains what that process is. So you've got both of those to read, ideally before you've come to this lecture. Very straightforward to read, but I think it's very important to understand the metaphors that we're using for our pedagogy, and I'll explain why in a minute as I start. So that's the first two things. Read the two articles, watch this, which should last about 20 minutes. Then in your group, the task I'd like you to talk about and then sort of reflect upon with your virtual tutor is what matters to you in your teaching. And I'll explain why we're thinking about what matters as I begin in a minute. And then the follow-up task is for the second 1,000 word reflection. And I'd like you to use that 1,000 words to reflect on any aspect of the planning that you've been doing in the previous weeks up until this point before half term, so whether it was the English, the maths, the science, some aspect of the broader curriculum, and to think about how you as an individual and individual within the planning team thought about the scaffolding, what interpretation you were using, what the rationale was, what it was designed to achieve, what are the practical techniques for achieving that metaphor. So 2 articles, a group discussion, what matters to you as a teacher, this lecture, and then to use the 1,000 second reflection to tie all of that together. So before I start to go into a bit more detail about the lecture, let's just have a little chat about some of the ideas about why I'm going to talk about what I'm going to be doing. So in the weeks previous to this lecture, I've been reading this book here, The Idea of a Brain, A History by Matthew Cobb. Absolutely brilliant. And the reason I'm reading it is because he's talking about the different metaphors that have been used in the research into the brain, and how those metaphors about the brain as a computer, as a clock, have added to our understanding and limited our understanding. And some of the key concepts in teaching are also metaphors. And so the theme that I'm thinking about here is that one of scaffolding. And metaphors can be very useful to deepen our understanding and shape our thinking, but they can also be limited. And that's certainly something perhaps that's happened with scaffolding in terms of understanding that, because it's very clear that one of the goals of scaffolding, and indeed you could argue a goal of teaching, is to move the learner to independence. So what does that mean? You know, the scaffolding, is the scaffolding within the task, or is it within the learner? And those are, when you read these 2 articles, are thinking about the implications of those ideas, and the application and the distortion of the metaphor is very important. I'm going to be talking to you in the lecture about what experts think about pedagogy, their expert views on pedagogy, on their own expertise. And certainly when I'm doing this, we're in the middle of the lockdown, And in the last few weeks, the role of experts has very much come to the fore, and how they are used. So experts can't provide us with definitive answers. Experts aren't policymakers, but experts' voices and the range of opinions so that people can make decisions about things has become much clearer in the public debate. And my research into expert teachers' views of teaching is motivated by that. How should we, what are the voices of teachers about what really good teaching looks like, and interestingly, what their aims are. And that's this term, what matters. What really matters to expert teachers in terms of what they're doing, coming back to their values. Because in the same way with this book, there is no one grand theory of the brain. There is no one grand theory of the brain. There is no one grand theory of learning or of teaching, and those aren't cop-outs. That's because what we're trying to explain is something complex, and perhaps all we can do is work towards understandings of some aspects of it over time. When you're looking for grand theories of everything in the complex world, they often don't exist, no matter what sort of scientific background you're coming from. And so really the idea then is to try to use this to sort of as a way of pulling together some of the thinking that you have been doing, so that this can support you into making some of your implicit thoughts more explicit. What are the assumptions that you're working on? Why are you teaching the way that you do? What do you think teaching is about? What do you want for your learners? Where are you coming from in relation to what they learn, and what you want them to learn, what you want them to do? What are your long-term goals? So what I'm going to do in the lecture is to talk about my research and talk about what I have found out about what really expert teachers think about teaching, and I'm just going to give you some of their thoughts, so that you can then go away with the group and think about some of these ideas, because these ideas actually aren't heard, because a lot of the voices around education are not teachers' voices and not expert teachers' voices, and maybe along with scientists and expert scientists' voices coming to the fore, maybe there's room for other experts to come into sort of policy making. Not that they have to make the decisions. There's a difference between, the judges don't make the law. There's a role for policymakers, clear roles and distinctions. The scientists are advising, the policymakers decide. But I do think that what teachers think about teaching is really important. And it's good to hear their voices. So that's what I'm going to do, to show you that. So I'm going to show you this. Just turn the... how can I do that?